the marketplace is a signal amplification, noise cancellation communication device that uses a hill climbing algorithm to cancel noise. So to kind of get this into layman's terms and out of algorithm jargon, um, everybody has opinions. People's opinions don't even necessarily all make sense to themselves. But we have a civilization to run here. We've got an economy, and the
Right.
economy at the end of the day has to make at least as much sense as is necessary so that things don't fall apart and we don't lose access to food and shelter.
Hello, Noah. How's it going today?
Hi, Ricky. It's going pretty well.
That's awesome, man. So you are a mathematician and a algorithm developers. Can you share with us about yourself? Like what makes you pursue a career as a mathematician and a professional algorithm developer?
Laziness, same as anybody else, I assume. Actually, it's sort of amusing. Laziness is touted as one of the virtues of programmers and algorithm developers because the entire point is coming up with more efficient and effective ways of doing things. And so, if you're sort of okay with doing lots of work, you actually generate very bad algorithms. In my case, I seem to have a natural facility for reasoning and a sort of very widespread interest in mathematics, where whether it's calculus or algebra or geometry, I just find all of these things fascinating. And while I'm not the expert that many people are on any of them, my ability to sort of draw from a very wide set of fields seems to give me a lot of tools in the box, if you will,
When did you
for
develop that passion for math?
um, well, it again, I kind of backed into it. I was like the fastest counter in grade school. I was the fastest adder and then the fastest multiplier. And then that sort of just kept happening. Basically, it is it is an interesting uh, thing that I guess that um, anybody that correctly executes any math problem will come to the same conclusion as anybody else. So
Right.
you're doing something that was done by somebody 3,000 years ago in exactly the same way that they did it. And that's true. It's a level of connection that is totally different from anything else. And also connection to the physical world, the ideas and thought world, even potentially aliens. There's been, numerous speculations on what would be involved if you could communicate with other intelligences, and mathematics is the basis. And in fact, uh, there's been recently some large language model work done on cetacean calls. So there's some people who believe that they've been able to use the same kind of mathematics that we're using to create things like ChatGPT to create things that can translate dolphin into reasonable human, signaling.
Right. And
And
is it through like programming, coding?
Well, so that's based on like, deep neural net technologies and the concept of back propagation, which is essentially just Newton's method translated to a networked set of equations combined with sort of the current reinforcement or deep learning techniques
Right.
that allow more efficient use of real world examples to train these networks to do things.
Right. And when you work with those mathematical equations, how much of it is imagination and how much of it is fact, right? Because because I know that you have to use a lot of tools, but then it takes a little bit of creativity and imagination to actually start it and then implement it.
It's very interesting. It's in some cases not really distinguishable. I saw an interview once with John Conway, who was talking about the experience of inventing an entirely new number system. And he said that he essentially spent, I think it was a couple of years, wandering around daydreaming,
Right,
effectively,
right,
um, and that the amazing and powerful thing, like I was saying about sort of the world of ideas, is I spent about 3 months doing the daydreaming part for my project. You are daydreaming. It is this sort of pure thought, pure imagination, but because you're using these mathematical tools, it's also all real at the same time. So every single thing that you're doing is simultaneously just a passing fancy or creative idea or whatever you want to call that, an inspiration and a realizable, you know, fact structured on the foundation of things like arithmetic and geometry that is replicable by others if they just walk that particular path. So it's it's a unique sensation, and it's intoxicating. I wish I could spend more time doing that, but I'm not that smart, so I gotta take the ones I can get.
I I can see the daydreaming and math kind of like goes together because I daydream all the time too. And then sometimes I need to back it up with my math. And I just do simple math like arithmetic in terms of like, if I want to do a certain amount of things and does the math work out for me? It doesn't make sense when I have 24 hours a day doing that. Let's say if I want to edit a paper of 500 words and 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 with that, within 500 words, how long does it take? And can I republish it, again and again and again on the newsletters? And I think that that's amazing when you have, a math formulaic backing your approach in anything.
Yeah, it is a very powerful and amazing set of tools that it connects so many different parts of your life and different parts of other people's lives into this system that just keeps working over and over and over again.
Awesome, awesome. Let's talk about the marketplace and financial system. Like I know that that is one of your favorite interests uh, within your research and work too. Can you tell us more about that?
So my thesis is that the market is a fundamentally misunderstood object. There's been a lot of explanations over the last 200-ish years about what these things are, uh, but we've been developing our awareness of systems engineering and so on, so we can say with much greater clarity what the marketplace is today than people 250 years ago um, could, even though the markets are substantially identical. And
Right,
so, what the marketplace is a signal amplification, noise cancellation communication device that uses a hill climbing algorithm to cancel noise. So to kind of get this into layman's terms and out of algorithm jargon, um, everybody has opinions. People's opinions don't even necessarily all make sense to themselves. But we have a civilization to run here. We've got an economy, and the
right,
economy at the end of the day has to make at least as much sense as is necessary so that things don't fall apart and we don't lose access to food and shelter. So we need to find this sort of midpoint of these opinions between the makers and users of every given kind of thing that we make and use, so that we don't make too much food and not enough houses, or too many houses and not enough shoes, or too many shoes and not enough water, or whatever. We need all these things to basically get made enough so that we have all of them all the time, because we have these lives that depend on being able to travel, say, 100 miles in a day from time to time, and so on. So the marketplace takes in this flood of human opinions
Mm.
and filters out these prices that are the balance points of information between the makers and users of things, to tell the makers, make this much, but once you start, if you're going to lose money, don't make any more, because we don't need any more after that. And it tells the users, use this much, but if you can't afford it, don't use any more than that, because you can't afford it. Like, we can't make that much of that. Uh, and the hill climbing piece, the way it does this is by keeping the number of buyers and sellers balanced all of the time. And so if a new buyer or a new seller, or more frequently, a lot of new buyers or a lot of new sellers comes on the field, it climbs the hill. They push that price away from where they'd like it to be, to get more people to show up on the other side to balance them out. So if a bunch of new buyers come on the scene, the price has to start going up so that some new sellers will come out of the woodwork. And if a bunch of new sellers come onto the scene, the price has to go down to get new buyers to get. Um, and so that's it. That's what the market does.
Right, right. And so in economics, there's a concept of third party intervention, right? The third, you know, entity intervene into the market like the government, or policies or taxes. What do you think about that?
Well, effectively, what that's doing is it's interfering with that information stream. And I think the important thing is that once you understand that that's an information stream, and that the information stream has a lot of potential interferences. So governments can institute new policies. Governments can also go to war or be attacked and
Right.
need to do things. So suddenly the government says, you know, we're making too much pastry. We need more gunpowder, and so we're just going to make people make the amount of gunpowder we say people need to make. And if pastry chefs get retrained, then that's on you, because like we're taking gunpowder now, and you guys got to figure out how to make that happen. So there's a lot of circumstances where uh, powerful entities, or even complementary entities, if people are watching the game on TV, maybe they want potato chips and a beer. Well, that means that the price of beer and the price of potato chips and the availability of professional sports are all kind of related to each other. And so beer and potato chip makers might have an interest in increasing the availability of professional sporting events. Um, or professional sporting events might have deals that make them interested in investing in potato chip manufacturers, or switching tastes up to make something more healthy to keep people awake longer for their games, whatever. So that's basically part of it. That it's not just a case that there's this discrete group of people that make wheat and this discrete group of people that make flour, and they need to kind of deal. It's a big, complicated universe with a lot of dimensions. And that's one of the major problems that we actually have with present marketplaces, because that hill climbing, just doing the seesaw of, we just need more buyers or we need more sellers right now, can't really take into account all the positions of all the people that have an interest or an awareness of what's really going on in that marketplace. And so what they do instead is they kind of allow fake deals to occur, where you agree to buy or sell in the future, and then you're going to buy yourself back out of that deal, hopefully at a profit. Well, hopefully for you anyway. um, before the future actually arrives. You don't actually have to have any of the stuff, um, which is fair enough. That system worked okay with sort of just people. But now that we have the computer resources to develop enormous numbers of uh, machines that can do these things, that just increases the noise level. And so the degree to which these complementary industries would need to invest properly in order to get prices to do what they actually need to be doing and so on, just becomes too indirect, too cumbersome, too expensive. And so what we're seeing is that these markets are becoming less stable, and therefore more expensive, basically for no other reason than it's easier for us to communicate with each other.
Right, right. And when you said that, these expensiveness that occurred based on the hill climbing factors, do you think the price will adjust itself, or is there any better way to make price adjusted? It become, much more manageable.
Well, that's where I come in. I've developed a system that instead of being emergent, which is emergent systems sort of do what they do because lots and lots of people are doing unrelated things, and those unrelated things kind of pile up on each other, and you get a mound that's sort of shaped the way you want it to be. Um, I've found a way to actually measure information, so I can take those opinions on board from people, charge them the amount that they feel that those opinions are worth, and then measure how much good that the opinions actually did when integrated into the mass of everyone's opinions, and then reward the ones that wound up having value the amount that they were valuable. And so by setting the differential between the charge and the reward, valuable opinions, which is basically informed, knowledgeable opinions, uh, can receive very, very high rates of return. And worthless opinions, which is, someone got a dream last night and saw some numbers in their head or something, will basically just pay the marketplace the cost it takes to filter them out of the system. So this actually changes the entire structure of the market from one where you're putting information in the hopes that you'll be able to find somebody that knows less than you to take advantage of so that your information is personally profitable, to one where uh, you're taking your information, informing the entire marketplace in the hopes that your information provides value across as many people that are less informed as you as possible. And you can take a share in the gain that all of them make on being able to use your superior knowledge in their own business.
Awesome. Yeah. What one thing that you mentioned that is like opened up my mind about these things is the opinions of people. I think it's for me, it feels like an idea that people have and trying to like put it out into the market. And then there's a lot of noises that trying to like fight against that opinion. And and it can be either it makes it more inconsistent that distract the price from being real, or there's a better way for you to like actually clarify those opinions and then justify that opinion, is it valid or not?
Yeah, exactly. And that's an advantage. That's another advantage that we now have with communication. It's much more possible to sort of create large aggregate assessments of things. People can put polls on the internet and get hundreds or thousands of responses with without any effort these days. And so uh, if you have a marketplace, if you've got an audience of people that are actually using this to conduct their own business, that they're going to have a pretty decent picture of what their own business looks like. And so when the market when the market comes off the rails, they can just say, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm going to pull back. And then that, if it's one person, well, you know, just like now, if you would rather buy a better grade of, fruit, but you can't afford it, well, you can't afford it. But if nobody can afford it, then it's time to start thinking about what we're actually making as a society. Because if we're spending a lot of effort to mass produce something that nobody can afford, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble very quickly.
Right, right. So how do you keep people happy? How do you keep buyers and sellers happy?
Uh, well, the first thing is happiness is an individual issue. People have to take care of their own happiness. The goal of the marketplace is to keep people engaged.
I know.
So the goal is to provide them a forum that's profitable for them to work with. And because every single trade is going to have these two sides, this buyer and seller side, and both need a profit in order to come to the table.
Yep.
Um, there will be a price point where there will be buyers and sellers that are in equilibrium. That exists for any given thing on any given day. I don't know what it is, and sort of nobody does. That's why we actually need to build markets to tell us what that is, and why when somebody with political power says, this is the table of prices for everything and nobody's allowed to charge anything different, then the Roman Empire collapses. The
Absolutely.
um, but that there is such a number because every buyer will pay less if you let them, and every seller will take more if it's there.
Right.
And so each unit that's produced and consumed has some marginal value attached to it. And and every time that happens, those two things are going to inch closer together. And eventually you'll get to some price where within, a few on this side and a few on that side, there's the same number of buyers and sellers of stuff on both sides. And if the few is big enough to justify a new business or a new enterprise, then somebody who's going to show up, tomorrow when they notice, oh, look, there's, a 0.01% surplus, or there's a little gap, over there, and they'll take that, they'll spin that up and get that business and try to find that spot. So there's a co-evolutionary thing with an economy where we're doing two things at the same time. We've got where we are,
Mhm.
uh, and what we can do with that, and we have where we're going,
Right.
and what the next smart thing to do. So as a student, having a sort of sane price structure will be able to tell you what kind of jobs should I have? Like, should I start a farm? Should I start a garage? Should I join a mega corporation at the bottom level and live inside a cubicle for 5 years? Like, what pays? And if you don't have a rational price structure, then you don't know what pays, and you'll kind of do whatever your friends are doing, or you'll do whatever the guy that is declared that he's dictating what the prices are doing, and things will get a little weird at that point.
Right. Do you think, you know, there could be like a technological invention? Let's talk about invention, right? When there is a technology like ChatGPT are being uh democratized, like published. Do you think it gives a lot of advantage for the people, let's say the consumer, to use them at their own advantage to bring more to the market?
In the current marketplace, the primary advantage of the technologies that exist and are on the drawing board, um, actually are with the internal players.
Right.
So something like ChatGPT is incredibly good at creating BS, basically. Um, and the people who can benefit most from a noise intensive universe are the people who charge for skimming noise out of the system.
Mhm.
So they could use something like ChatGPT to generate more random signaling to change up people's opinions in ways that would be harder and harder to cope with unless you knew what kind of poison was being like fed into the stream, which as the people doing that they would know,
Right.
and so then they can take advantage of that. So for example, just a few days ago, Bloomberg announced that they were going to use chat gpt type technology, but instead of training it up on a vast corpus of written data, which is what ChatGPT is using, they were going to use the Bloomberg database. So they have the most comprehensive fund of historical financial data that's ever existed. So they're going to train a like a faux mind
Wow.
whose
Yeah.
entire existence will be the complete knowledge of all financial transactions, and then have it do whatever they ask it to do, right? Well, do you think they're going to ask it to figure out how to smooth out and reduce the costs of the financial industry, i.e., their customer base and income stream? Or do you think they're going to ask it how to make themselves personally wealthier?
Right.
Um, I would expect that the second would be a lot more popular with them.
Yeah, yeah. You just opened my mind about that part where, companies like Bloomberg that has the whole history of finance statements of all the companies that they collected in the terminal. And with like a single integration with ChatGPT, they can, work their way with the system, well, with, generate all the data as one single chat box. Like,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and then they could just sell that to their clients, and then, who what are their clients going to ask it to do?
right.
Uh, Probably a lot of bizarre things. I mean, look at how many weird things that ChatGPT has been asked to do so far.
Yeah, that's fascinating for to think of in term of that magnitude. Uh, let's talk about game theory. Like we in economic, like I'm from an economic major, and and
Mhm.
and we talk a lot about game theory. It's a hard topic to study and learn in class. We don't even know what it is, but I finally come down to like a really, my opinion, definition is this: the study of making strategic decision. Is that what you
Yeah, so I tell people this all the time. Game theory is the most flippantly named thing in human history, probably. And what it is it's the mathematics of strategy.
Mm,
Uh, and so from that perspective, it really changes the way that you're thinking about things because we're we have all the traits. We're mortal, we're human, we have interests and so on. And so it's very tempting and dominating when you encounter something to think about yourself.
right.
Like what do I want? What's a button I press that makes what I want happen? And what game theory shows you is that in a system that that has sort of any interest going on, you've got this panel of buttons in front of you, and then there's these other people, not all of whom you might even know, and they've got panels of buttons in front of them. And what's going to happen is going to be a result of the button you press and the buttons they press. And it might be the case that the thing you want isn't on your panel, it's on somebody else's panel. It might not be on anybody's panel. Maybe that's just not an option here.
Yeah.
And so once you're in that mind frame, then things become a very different proposition for, trying to think about things in your own terms. But then at the design perspective, things get even crazier because now you don't need to think about what you want or how to get it or what's going on with other players. You need to think simultaneously about what everybody's interests are, what everybody's capacities are, and how to weave those things together in ways that reinforce rather than sort of degrade
Yes,
each other's capacities. And that's not necessarily possible. I mean, a lot of it comes down to what people actually can do, what people actually want. Um, you can't create a market in serial killers and like co-eds. Like they have fundamentally different interests.
right.
One of them wants to kill, the other one doesn't want to get killed. So you gotta deal with that in a totally different way. But markets are very nice because there's really no point in going there without your own interests. And there's no point in participating unless it's in your direct interests. So it's a much simpler environment to just create something where people basically just have two choices.
Mm.
Like, am I in or am I out? If what I'm being presented with, and if what's being presented to me is interesting to me, then I'm in. Um, Now, unfortunately, the world's complicated enough that you actually have to do a little bit more work, and there's some gradations. But based on that kind of simple model, you can you can find what the structures of participation and non-participation need to look like. And then it's sort of an imagination and searching exercise to find mathematical functions that have the properties that are necessary based on the interest functions. And then once you've done those two things, then what my approach spits out is essentially a specification for code. And then if you write the code that can match that specification, then you've done it. You've got a marketplace.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. Um, when you work on those mathematical, like what programming do you use? Like, to generate this function, do you use Python? Do you use other?
Uh, well, when I'm actually coding,
Right.
I've got one written up in Perl, and I have another one that I worked with a friend on that's written up in Clojure, which is
Mm,
a Lisp that runs on the Java Virtual Machine, JVM.
wow. And are they integrated with, ChatGPT also? Like, or makes it easier? No.
No, this is actually quite simple. The Perl version, which was sort of a down and dirty thing that I wrote just to see what the scale requirements of the system be. The core computations are around 300 lines, and Perl and Python are fundamentally pretty similar languages in terms of brevity and power and so on.
Right.
So around 300 lines of Python would also be enough to do the core computations.
That's awesome. I have some of the last questions I'm asking is like, what would be your advice for like someone who just started, one who's passionate about marketplace and financial systems, and they're in the path they want to use technology to leverage their understanding? Where should they start?
Well, I think that the existing models are very tilted against the users at this point, to the extent that I think it's basically criminal. Um, so I would encourage such people with those interests to reach out to me or to take a look at my technology and look into that. But if you're insistent on playing the games that are presently available, um, I'd say pursue open source database strategies to try to create very large, semi coordinated online behaviors. And what you're looking for is identifying uh, organizations with resources have insufficiently defended them uh, and have created an opening. So things like the Wall Street bets scenario uh, where they were over shorting a company.
Mhm.
Um, it's not that's not good enough because the company itself could decide to backstab the people if that's going on. But uh, there are an inordinate number of strategies, some very trivial and thuggish, and some very sophisticated and also thuggish that that are being used by the inside players to make their money right now. And those strategies are not defended or defensible. But they require a lot more information and capital to exploit than is likely to be in your own personal possession. So take advantage of the internet. Build build larger networks than the markets are currently coping with or thinking about. And then, just take it away from them because it doesn't, it's not legitimately theirs in the first place. They're doing it through these nefarious behaviors that are causing the problem that I'm attempting to address.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you is when you said that the internet is a big marketplace, that you could have. Right.
Well, the internet's not a marketplace. A marketplace has needs to have certain rules to make it actually function well. The
Right.
internet is not really a signal processing device. It's more of a noise machine, but it's a much bigger noise machine. Well, an example I give is that if you have noise canceling headphones, there's a difference between being in like your school library and going to like a death metal concert where they're playing rocket powered jackhammers. Like the noise canceling headphones in the library are fine, but if these sounds coming in through like your body and your face, the fact that your ears can't hear anymore isn't going to change anything. So um, they're currently profiting from creating an excess of noise,
Mhm.
but they cannot conceive of the amount of noise that a million people all cacophonately, doing something could possibly generate. And
Sure.
and with a million brains behind it, there's another one, things like internet treasure hunts or puzzles, which were kind of a thing back in the 90s, a little bit in the early 2000s. Um, but they sort of went away because the designers sort of quickly figured out that every human being on earth is smarter than any human being on earth. And so no matter how obscure or crazy you made any of the puzzles, they would just all get solved instantly, basically, because somebody somewhere would like see something and put something else on. There have also been a few actually interesting mathematical theorems that some leading mathematicians have basically put up on their blog and got thousands in some cases. I believe there's one in the tens of thousands of collaborators to all sort of toss ideas onto a pile until they crack open this question.
Wow.
And so that's a potential that exists. It's not the kind of thing that can be replicated by a private enterprise that's attempting to create a private advantage for themselves. But as a person that doesn't really have that option or those resources, there's a lot more of you than there are of them, and you might as well take advantage of that if they're going to be keeping a rigged game in play.
Awesome. How do people reach out to you? Wow.
The most direct way is email, Noah P. Healy at yahoo.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Noah Healy, there. And there's a website, Cordisc, CORDIC, .com, where you can learn more about how my marketplace functions. Yeah, that's it.
That's amazing, man. I appreciate that you took your time to be on the show today.
Thanks for having me here. This was a good interview.